All of this helps develop that into a culture, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So the other aspect of this is contractual risk transfer. And most people consider insurance as one and key aspect of that, and that's Eric's arena. But there's other options here, other alternatives, and that is vendors that you use that are handling your security devices or providing computing in the cloud. They should be giving you certificates of insurance. You must assure that they have insurance. And the contracts with those vendors should have hold harmless agreements. And we could go on for days about how to all of these aspects of the contracts, so that basically it comes down to, if they're negligent, they're responsible. If you're negligent, you're responsible, your business. So that's one aspect of risk management. Another aspect that I spend a lot of time on is continuity planning. So I try to get businesses to identify some of the vulnerabilities. And the experts say, the expensive experts say, you should try to identify all of them. You should have a security scorecard, a BCP plan, incident response plan. All of that sounds pretty intimidating to a small business. What I try to do with my clients is just to get them to focus on a couple of the most significant and practice and do drills for those, rather than spend a lot of time doing these what-if scenarios. It can be very intimidating if you really seriously sit down and think about all the things that can go wrong and then try to come up for a plan with each one of those. One of my favorite quotes is, "Indecision is the greatest theft of opportunity." Most times, these crises require some sort of quick response to be resilient. And those things occur not by referring to written manuals and guidelines. They occur because it's been incorporated into the culture of the business. And people, senior people, can operate to handle the crisis based on some muscle memory they've had from practicing this. Some of these things that can go wrong, I call them tabletop drills. You can expand war games so that you can actually go through a tabletop drill that simulates a crisis as closely as possible. Now, the thing is, most likely, you're not going to identify the crisis that actually hits, but planning for it is 90% of the factor of making a business resilient. Another famous quote from General MacArthur, somebody said, going into battle, a plan is essential. When you get there, it's useless. And that's exactly true with crisis planning for a business. So I'm going to cut this short because I don't want to take up over anybody else's time. But a lot of this I like to relate to stories. I have a lot of stories, as Steve knows. So one of my stories that relates to this is, a few years ago, I had a vendor in the garment business who was in vendor payments in the company. Her name was Lucy. I'll call her for this. I'll call her My Lucy. And she made a terrible mistake because she didn't listen to that little birdie on her shoulder. She'd been doing this for 20 years. She got an email invoice from a longtime foreign supplier who we'll call Alice. And Alice telling her to transfer $160,000 to their bank with a 15-digit bank account number. Now, My Lucy has done this hundreds of times. She knows Alice. They've had conversations about their grandkids over their cell phones. So she sends a text message back to Alice, say, "Oh, you meant," and she gives her the 4 wrong account. And the text message comes back, "Oh, crazy day. Oops, sorry. Thank you." So she makes a transaction and $160,000 goes off into the ionosphere. My Lucy was just devastated. And if only she had picked up the phone and called Alice and said, "Do you know you have those bank account numbers wrong?" All of this could. So in the end, we got insurance reimbursement and all was well. But that 20 years of experience failed My Lucy that time. So one last comment, and it will lead right into what Eric's going to talk about. Over the last year or so, I found the completion of applications of insurance to renew or to continue or to get new insurance coverage has really become onerous on the cybersecurity aspects. They take about many more hours to complete than they used to. And this is where Eric comes in. I work closely with Eric and other brokers to help my clients complete those applications so that they can get the insurance. And Eric can tell you his stories about completing applications, right, Eric? Take it away.
Yep. Let me just throw something in there real quick. So far more detailed than ever before, but also constantly changing. You need to have, it takes a village in some ways. You need to have the appropriate type of consultative professional who has some road experience in this space and has seen things over the last few decades to help with the customized plan for the business. In some cases, that might even become part of the insurance application. So over to Eric, who works in the insurance space, commercial insurance professional, and the concept of cyber liability has come up a great deal over the last couple of years. It's a central idea. It's not just a product. Again, it's something that changes every single day that you need continuous counsel for. So Eric, talk to us a little bit about some of the things you're seeing out there.
Thanks, Steve. And I think, excuse me, I think you make a great point. I think, and I'm always leery of an insurance agent or an insurance broker that tells you that they're an expert, in some sort of coverage. And honestly, cyber liability keeps developing, almost day by day right now with all the attacks and everything that we're seeing. I just wanted to kind of start off with some, just kind of some facts that I found when doing some research for the webinar today. I see that 1 in 5 small business, I work in the small business realm of commercial insurance, and 1 in 5 businesses have fallen prey to some sort of ransomware or cybersecurity event. Which on my side of things is making this coverage a lot easier to sell. The last thing that a client wants to see is another coverage that they have to buy. They're trying to run their business, taxes are going up, fuel's going up, and then here we come to sell another type of coverage. So cyber liability is definitely in everybody's minds. The hardest thing for some small business owners to understand is they think it's only useful for the bigger type businesses, government entities, infrastructure companies, things like that. But if you look at statistically, a lot of the cyber liability or the hacks, the ransomware hacks are coming, right into small businesses. I think to go along with what Mike was saying is that we can do everything to prepare, from a risk management to running the fire drills. But I think what we all forget a lot about is that we're not dealing with normal people. We're talking about hackers. We're talking about people that are going and looking for nefarious activities. So, the more stops that we can put in place, we can plan, we can do all that stuff, but we have to have, comprehensive cyber liability insurance policies. So I just want to talk a little bit. A lot of people talk about the coverage that they currently have. I'm a big proponent of going out and purchasing a standalone cyber liability policy. Insurance companies in the past or in the last couple of years have started to throw on cyber liability coverage. It's not as comprehensive, I find, in my experience over the last year or so, especially in the start of coronavirus. We've started to see these cyber liability policies become restrictive as a rider, as opposed to buying a standalone cyber liability policy. So I always encourage my clients or people that I'm trying to give advice to really look at the cost difference and the coverage difference between a standalone cyber liability policy and a rider that might just go along with your other coverages. And within that cyber liability policy, there's basically 2 types of coverages that are relevant. It's first party coverage, which is pretty standard. The first party coverage is going to cover the actual business itself. And then third party coverage is going to cover, the business's responsibilities to those type of, to other type of vendors, customers, clients, or anything like that could be in there. I'm just going to give a couple. I know nobody really wants to hear a lot about insurance, but I'm going to just kind of give some examples right now of first party and third party type of coverages. First party coverages, again, that's protecting the actual business owner, is business interruption. Okay, so let's say quick example, client has some ransomware activity. They shut down their network or systems, and they're out of business for 5 or 10 days. I think I read Delta Airlines back in 2018 or 2019 was out of business for a day or two, and it cost them, I think, about $650 million. So business interruption is huge. So if you're a company, especially a small business that's operating, on a limited budget, if your business is hacked or there's some sort of ransomware event, business interruption could become a very big coverage. We also talk about wire transfer fraud, which is what Mike was talking about, where we have some sort of situation where there's a theft of funds, a financial fraud loss, and the insured suffers as a result of malicious actor duping them or impersonating themselves or a client. Cyber extortion, ransomware, that's pretty prevalent right now in the news. Company comes in, hacks you and demands $50,000, or most of the time it's a lot higher than that, to give you your information back. And that's where I go back. That's where we're seeing a lot of claims right now, is in the ransomware space. And again, I just always remind my clients that with the ransomware, 90% of those actors that come in and hack your computer end up getting some sort of payments. Okay. So that's one coverage that you really want to make sure that your cyber liability policy covers. And the other thing that I have to say is that you also want to make sure, again, we're not dealing with people that are upstanding citizens. You want to have this coverage for those type of events. And then some of the third-party coverages that we want to talk about. So if you have, let's say you're storing clients' data, and it can be from very small number of records to a huge number of records, and you owe them some sort of credit monitoring, you owe them some sort of response to that breach, that would all be included in your third-party coverage. But again, I also want to tell everybody that it's so important to communicate with your insurance provider. Listen, nobody wants to call up their insurance broker and say, hey, listen, I want to purchase more insurance. But I think it's very important, as you look at your insurance program as a whole, you need to communicate with your broker so that they know the exposure that's out there. There isn't a one-size-fits-all cyber liability policy, just like there isn't a one-size-fits-all general liability policy. You have to communicate with your broker so that they can understand your type of business, what your exposure is as far as your cyber exposure, and help you to try to guide you in the direction that you need to go from a cyber liability policy. So again, Steve asked, hey, what's one word that you want to kind of relay here today? And I'm going to say communication. I can talk all day about the certain types of parts of the cyber liability policy, but if you can't, you have to communicate with your insurance broker, your insurance provider, your risk management, also your security, your cybersecurity team, to make sure that they truly understand and can assess the need that you have from a cyber liability standpoint.
Not only are the threats changing on a daily basis, as far as I can observe, but the tools, technology, softwares, platforms to help combat the threats change on a regular basis. But in your world, Eric, just to kind of wrap this up, even the terms that are used inside of the insurance policies seem to be changing on a regular basis. What denotes cyber liability or cyber warfare or just general warfare? Talk to us a little bit about that. It's kind of like a moving target, isn't it?
And that's why I say you never really want to trust anybody that's an expert from an insurance, and I'm sure Mike sees this all the time as well. But it is evolving, right? So in insurance policies, war was always a pretty defined, pretty tight definition when it came to an exclusion or how the policy would respond in the event of a war. But now we're in a totally different environment, and insurance companies, and I think the general public as a whole, what constitutes, warfare at this point, and how would that, kind of come into the cyber liability realm? I think any of us that would tell you that we know how this is all going to play out would be fools. But it'll be very interesting to see, how this continues to roll out.
Yep. Open communication with your trusted advisors is very important. Business owners, something I've seen firsthand, they'll often get a policy in place and then they'll try to avoid any further contact until renewal time just because they're afraid that there might be another unexpected bill that comes their way. But to be in regular contact, especially around a topic like this with your insurance professional is by far and away a best practice. As far as, one thing Mike had alluded to as well, and then we're going to turn everything over to the folks from SailPoint. Actual completing the applications, a lot more information, a lot more detailed than ever before. Some of the insurances might even require that you have certain measures in place, certain tools like a subscription to SailPoint to make sure that you're actually underwritten for the coverage. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing out there with that.
Yeah, again, back to my initial kind of response is that, we used to be able to just throw cyber liability coverage on a policy and kind of tuck it away and be done with it. Say, hey, our client has coverage now for the next year. But it has become a lot harder, as insurance companies continue to evolve and this cyber threat continues to evolve. It's become a lot harder to make sure that our clients have the right, network security in place,